I have run through the darkened streets, run from the golden calf.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to The Exchange. We're thrilled that you're here. You are surrounded by the Face Value Show. The idea for this show came from one of our gallery committee volunteers who's actually here tonight, Gina DiGnazio. The idea with Face Value, a portrait show, but as with all of the things that we do here at The Exchange, we want people to think about them as broadly as possible. So it doesn't have to simply be someone's face. You can see here, people have thought about what a portrait is very broadly. Animals, of course, and people's backs. All of the pieces in this show, and there were 169 of them, by 77 artists from 10 Pennsylvania counties. 34 of those artists are showing here for the very first time. So we're continually bringing new people in, which is thrilling. I know there are new faces here in the audience as well tonight. That's great. It's exactly why we're here, is to spread what we do among this community and grow the sense of this as a community. The storytelling events that we do, like tonight, are all about community. As we tell each other our stories, we figure out who we are, what this region is, what's important to us. So we can show it on the wall, and we can also talk to each other. It's all about exchange, which is why this place is called The Exchange. With that, with no further ado, I will introduce our first storyteller tonight, Arthur Sterngold.
I'm not as tall as you, so I'm going to tilt this down a little. And just by means of context, let me tell you that I taught at Lycoming College for 30 years, and so this is based on an incident that occurred at that college. And I'm going to read it. My title of my story is Boris, the Fat-Faced Book Buyer. At U.S. colleges and universities, it's not unusual to find freelance book buyers poking their heads into faculty offices and offering to purchase textbooks they spot on the professor's shelves. The buyers then sell the books they purchase to the campus bookstore, which market them as used textbooks to the students. While many instructors enjoy the cash they receive from these transactions, I usually found the book buyers to be annoying distractions. I was the kind of professor who continually tweaked my lecture notes right up until class time, and I resented it when book buyers tried to elbow their way into my office while I was preparing for class. Freelance book buying is a very competitive business, and if they hope to earn a living, the buyers have to be tenacious and assertive. None was more aggressive than a Russian man I'll call Boris, because I never asked his name. Boris was a large, loud, and forceful person who used to march right into my office and start pulling books off my shelves, even when I said I did not have time to deal with him that afternoon. He simply did not take no for an answer. One day, I was surprised to see Boris striding down the hallway. By the way, this is all true, although somewhat amazing. One day, I was surprised to see Boris striding down the hallway, pushing a small infant in a baby stroller, and followed by a woman who seemed to be struggling to keep up with him. Boris was loudly announcing to anyone who would listen that this was his wife and his newborn daughter, and he was actually handing out cigars to the few embarrassed individuals he passed in the hallway. I can still picture him forcing cigars on students who had no idea what was going on. I was outraged that Boris was using his baby and his wife as sales gimmicks to ply his trade, and I wondered if they were really Boris's family members at all. I honestly thought that he had simply come across a woman pushing a baby stroller in front of the college and said, "Hey, for $100, Would you come with me as I make my rounds? As usual, I was feverishly preparing for a class that started in less than a half hour. And I told Boris in no uncertain terms that I was not interested in selling him any books. Predictably, Boris ignored my pleadings, barged into my office anyway. I still have a lot of feelings about this incident, and started pulling out books he was interested in buying. While reaching for a book above my computer desk, Boris knocked over a large coffee mug that spilled hot liquid all over my computer and keyboard and desk and onto the floor. It goes without saying that my PowerPoint presentation for class that afternoon was destroyed, and my class went horribly. I was furious. I ordered Boris to get out of my office immediately, and I slammed the door behind him without bothering to say goodbye to him or to his alleged wife and daughter. In the days that followed, I led an effort on campus to get my college to ban Boris from doing business on our campus and to require book buyers to have to apply ahead of time for permission to solicit faculty members in their offices. Thankfully, Boris was never seen or heard from again, and my colleagues and I agreed it was good riddance. "30 years have passed since that incident occurred, and lately I find myself thinking about Boris more often than I imagined I would. Now, however, instead of feeling angry and self-righteous, I feel remorseful and ashamed for how I behaved that day. Once again, I picture Boris traipsing down the hallway towards my office, pushing a baby stroller with his wife trailing behind him. This time, however, I step into the hallway, give Boris a big Russian bear hug, and bellow out, "Congratulations on the birth of your baby." I actually have it written here in the Russian, but I would not even attempt to pronounce it. I accept the cigar that Boris pushes into my hand and promise to smoke it later. Then I turn to Boris's wife and I tell her what a pleasure it has been to work with Boris these last few years, and what an honor it is to finally meet the woman who Boris talks about each time he visits. I ask if I can hold their daughter, but I do not wait for an answer. Instead, I pick up the infant in my arms, kiss her on the forehead, and exclaim, "Welcome to this world, my child. I wish for you a long and prosperous life," which is a popular Russian folk blessing. I say to this startled child, "Someday perhaps you will work with your father and buy textbooks from professors like me. As your parents will teach you, Russia has produced the greatest novelists of all times. By buying and selling books, your dad makes them more affordable to my students. His is a truly honorable profession." At that moment, it happens again. Boris spills hot coffee all over my computer and keyboard and desk and onto the floor. And it goes without saying that my PowerPoint presentation for that afternoon has been destroyed and that my class will go horribly. We all stare at the mess for a long, speechless moment. Then I roll my eyes in exaggerated disbelief and I say to Boris, "How did a clumsy Russian oaf like you attract such a beautiful wife? You must have impressed her with all those textbooks you've been stealing from me over the years." Boris and his wife offer to clean up the spill, but I tell them that today their job is to celebrate the birth of their child. I give Boris one final bear hug, and looking straight into his eyes, I say, "Boris, for many years, I have wanted to apologize to you for my rude behavior on that day you introduced me to your beautiful wife and your newborn child. Can you ever forgive me for my stupidity and my callousness? I pray that Boris and his wife and his child are living happy and prosperous lives today. Perhaps they are working together, managing a large and successful book buying business. I like to imagine that on the side, they occasionally give out free copies of the classic novels by Solzhenitsyn, Dostoevsky's, and the other great Russian writers who taught us about the power of forgiveness and redemption. Thank you.
What's up with
Business and economics, or monkey business.
The question for those of you who may not have heard this online was, what did Arthur teach? He calls it monkey business, but business and economics. So now from a first-time person here, thank you very much for that. We'll go to a returning reader who also has had work on the walls in the gallery, Bob Walz.
Okay, I have some poems. Yesterday was my birthday. Thank you. And it was fortunate that it was, because a fair amount of the poems I selected to read are about aging, me specifically. And now I'm solidly in, I hate to say, the 70s. So these poems have become even more pertinent for me. I'd also like to say that I worked trying to select poems that would present some type of portraiture. And since to really convey a whole portrait of a person would take thousands of pages, perhaps the Russian masters and Dickens and some others approach that, but not even they, I think, have captured the whole self. So, my poems. I'm hoping that poems present enough of the essence of characters that the the listener's imagination can figure out, if that's the word, create a mental image of a whole character. Hence, I began. This is, the first one is a shorty. It's titled, Will a Face Remain? If I shuck this pain, will a face remain, or a hard, featureless stone that, like a seed, may still split open and bloom, though the spring is fallen and its green brilliance is long, long past and gone. The second poem is titled The Three-Ring Circus, and it's my attempt at a psychomachia, what the literary critics would call a psychomachia or psychodrama, in which elements of the mind are represented by characters in a poem or in any real literary work. So, the three-ring circus. I tire of the three-ring circus. I'd really like to quit and throw my boss, the speaker of the audience, and my mind's house into my cage with my lion. Let 'em have it out. But that would be madness. They both chastise me, one to use a stronger whip to keep my beast at bay, the other a tamer touch to let him have more play. I'm plain tired and want to quit. I hate my middleman cage and my hoops and chair, but I must be paid, and so I stay, though I'm tired and want to quit. How long can I resist my cruel overseer's wish to forever defeat those teeth by putting my whole head into the fanged jaws, hoping my job won't eat me alive before I bow for the final applause? The next one, Now the Trees Stand Blazing, again dealing with the personal issue of age. And the controlling metaphor here is winter, which I thought, well, that's kind of inappropriate for spring. But then I thought, well, it is just a metaphor here, and also last week. Well, so here goes. Now the trees stand blazing, bright as signs forewarning that winter has come stalking its green prey. But I stand ghostly pale, hoary and white with age, waiting yet for my fiery blaze. Oh, give me an autumn before my winter. Oh, let me blaze in a full, bright, iridescent cascade before, like the leaf, I fall withered and wrinkled, waiting silently for snow to bury me deep. The next one, I think, somewhat biographical, but it could apply to a fair amount of people you may know. It's called Darkness. Little jade Buddha, statue on my night table, carved from hard, cold stone, drawing next to my heart and soul. You sit so unemotional that ages have not changed your visage. Were you there when Annie died? Was that you who so cried? Ages have not changed your stance. I so envied. Little jade Buddha, only in dreams are you able to move away from stone and whisper the woes of your heart and soul. Yet ages have not changed your visage that remains so unemotional. Buddha has your dead heart, withdrawn so far through time, that it is stiller than your stance and buried as deep as mine. The next one, In the Garden, bit of a fantasy. Here it goes. In the garden, by the thicket, under the tree, that's where she's been. See her footprints? Don't tell me there's nothing there. Dear sir, she walks lighter than air. And in the wind, listen, in the wind is her singing. Don't tell me you do not hear. Dear sir, her voice is sweet lavender. Once when I feared my death from empty loneliness, I rode out to capture love from the newly bloomed baby's breath. And I put the pulsing quintessence in a little ruby locket box and hung the chain over my jealous heart. The still lake shore was lent, the most charming curve and rounded shape, and the streams gushed and wildly rushed, while the plant's buds grew to burst with the tallest flowers of sweetest scent, whose colors infused the black-lit night with the brightest iridescence. But then slowly, dear sir, the light began to drain, and thunder resounded from out the box. Fields, streams, and lake lost their gentle grace, and all the mountains began to quake with an oppressive malignance. Their shadows cast the valley into an all-consuming darkness that crept into the very core of my soul and whispered to me to relent by giving her her lost heart back. And so, dear sir, ever on ever I wait here, waiting ever to catch her. When I give all love to her, she will give the world back to me. But she likes tricks, sir, and will not appear. Oh, don't tell me she is gone or dead, or worse, has never been. Dear sir, there's no music, no sweetness in an otherwise barren wind, and no light for the darkness, for all the darkness then. And last, we have a troubled soul. His name is Ted, and that's about all I know about him, except this bio of sorts. He ties his boots with triple knots and pulls his hat hard down upon his head. All he has is an old army cot and tattered tarp above his moldy bed. He keeps only what he must. The rest is give to those he knows not. And at night he lies down in his dark dread, on moonless fields where endless battles are fought, and in the only place that he is kept, he trudges through the victories and his part, and dreams along with the other dead, where he sees himself in the enemy's heart. And that's about it. Thank you. By the way, other readers, if you want to use this podium, feel free.
So one of the greatest privileges of my job here, I'm here basically 10 to 6, Monday through Friday. Artists come in and they bring their work and they tell me their stories. And then I get to share those stories with other people who come in. Again, it's part of that exchange. You don't necessarily have to be here to have your story told here if you've told it to me. One of the people who has told me a lot of stories about himself is our next reader, Bob McCormick, who has had work in a number of our shows. A terrific example of why when we make art, some of it is about sharing with the world, some of it is about figuring out who we are. So Bob?
Just last week, I finally finished a second book it's a combination of paintings about my life, my upbringing. I grew up in the coal region in a what we call a patch town, which is just like a little town that was built around the mines back in the day. And my grandfather, Patrick McCormick, arrived here. It will be 150 years ago on April 1st. And I never knew them because they were all gone. They had lots of sad Irish stories. We do love sadness too. So anyway, this collection of works reflects my efforts to understand him and my desire to honor these people. So I'm going to read you 3 stories today from the book. And the first one I picked is Wonder Bread. Do I need to stand by this or just stand here? Yeah, okay. Okay, and it's just here on my pad. I got the PDF from somebody. I call this Wonder Bread. It was painted in 2023. I'll show you the painting when I'm finished. I remember sitting through Slumdog Millionaire in 2009 at the Bloomsburg Cinema Center and being appalled at the horrific conditions flashing across the screen. How could people endure such destitution? On my drive home after the movie, I recalled our early poverty. Certainly nothing even close to what I'd just viewed on the screen, but it brought to mind traveling with my dad one night as he delivered boxes of food sent from his boss to needy families each Thanksgiving. I was probably about 4 or 5 years old as Dad drove us to the nearby borough of Mahanoy Plain. Upon arrival, we parked the car, we grabbed some boxes, mounting the ill-lit and dusty staircase to the second-floor apartment. That was my first surprise. I had never seen such a space. After Dad knocked, a guy opened the door and we stood at the entry to a darkened kitchen, crowded with numerous adults and kids. Candlelit, some shadows huddled at the table while others made room for me and my dad. They seemed thrilled to welcome us. I really didn't have any idea why. They generously thanked Dad for the turkey and fixins he had brought. None of his words could convince them that the meal had come from his boss, Sam Shoemaker, in Ashland. Exiting the premises, Dad asked me if I noticed what the family had been supping on. Franco-American spaghetti from tins, cold. They had no means to warm it up, to cook, no electricity, no juice. I then got why the narrow stairwell had seemed so dreary and dark. No power. And the crowded family wore so much clothing to guard against the November chill and the coming nightfall. These folks belonged to our neighbor's family. They lived in an apartment, not a house. On that gray, rainy evening, I first saw that real people can be that poor, and they didn't live so far away. I climbed into the car, and we drove back to our warm house in the Run, where Mom had supper waiting. I felt glad to be home. And let me just show you the picture. Now you have to understand, I'm not a trained painter. I'm what they call me?
Folk artist.
A folk artist, there you go. Anyway, I don't know if you can see it, but it's my childhood memory. I was like 4 or 5 years old, going up these steps and coming into this room, and there are all these people who kind of crowded around the table and preparing supper. Anyway, that's...
How is that done?
Oh, this is painted, it's acrylic paint done on a sheet of metal roofing. So, and it kind of distorts things even further, which works good for me because I'm not really real good at staying on the lines anyway, so if you're not painting on the lines, it makes sense that it's messy, so kind of came out neat. And here's another one. I'll show you this time. I'll show you the picture first. This is another portrait. This is called A Visit to Mrs. Toole. It's also done on a roof tile. My neighbor's barn. He put in a new barn. The roof tiles were from 1907. Can you believe that? On the roof down the street till 2014. And now they're on my stuff. And it really helps actually to kind of think, I'm in my brain think, the roof actually saw this, actually lived through some of these stories that I'm sharing with you. So this one, I call this A Visit to Mrs. Toole. It becomes a poem at some point. I painted it in 2019. As my grandfather, Patrick McCormick, passed the first 6 years of his life in Western Ireland, I spent the first 6 years of mine west of Gerardville. I'm joking a bit, but those early days left quite a lasting impression on my tender senses. I wonder if it was the same for him. By the way, although I lived those formative years under his roof, I never met the man, have never even seen a photo, but I'm searching. And throughout the process, I feel like I'm coming to know a bit of Pat. We had one neighbor who lived up the road in the run, and she went by the name of Mrs. Toole. Let's see if I can capture a wee bit of her sweet presence in this childlike verse, A Visit to Mrs. Toole. One dusty day, we kids took a walk beyond the yard and up the road to say hello and bring a gift to the gran who called it her abode. With her special big son who rabbits raised, most seriously, sure, his look would say. Ginny, the bravest, stepped up front. Joanne, our kin from way down south, had never seen such a wee small house, where the coal stove took up half the room, and in I swept, a whisking broom. Willie, the man-child, though gentle, stressed tight. His biggest black rabbit ran off last night, and not to be found till now, he groaned. I hid in the cracks and closed my face. His grumbles passed, brushing my cheek. Outside, coal ash filled every ridge, and blasted rocks sailed over orange-gray hills. We learned to duck early and dodge to the side, but play we must, so took it in stride. The yard we knew, beside the crick, forever banned, would make us sick. Mud would swallow and rats would drool, so better go visit old Mrs. Toole. Thank you. She was a sweet old lady. And she, by the way, was the grandmother of the people we were bringing food to. But my one niece told me, take the name out. So I'm telling you that, but that's to tell the rest of the story. I'll read you one more thing. I'm just going to skip way to the end. See if I can find it here. Oh, just lost it. Okay. What are you ready for? A longer one or a shorter one? I have one of each.
Whatever you're interested in.
Okay, well then you're going to get the long one. This is about my grandmother, another person who I never met. Her name was Virginia Kelly, and my mother's mother. And she was legendary. Within the family, she was legendary. Very, one of those like kind of strong, salt of the earth type of human beings. And so this is, the painting was painted in 2022, and the poem written sometime thereabouts. I call it Red Row. When they talked about their house in another patch, Locust Dale, it was, the Dale.
I grew up in Mount Carmel.
Oh, then you know. Yeah, certainly.
My grandparents lived in Alaska.
Oh, Alaska. Oh, over by Mount Carmel. Yeah, I was going to say, not
Alaska.
The one in our neck of the woods.
Carmel.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You probably know somebody, I know that. Anyway, this is called Red Row. Virginia stands on the front porch, arm resting on the rail, looking grandmotherly with a nod to her departing guests. Her printed blouse, faded, tired as she, sagging in the sunlight, shines gently and warm. And though she passed but months before I arrived, her legend echoed many a year. Virgie's strength, her wisdom, her goodness, Her sorrow after Thomas died, salt to the earth, turning dry. 9 kids lived in that company home. Add mom, dad, and errant uncle on occasion, and quickly a dozen or so must be fed and washed and dressed and relieved, an outhouse for that. I asked Mom once what it felt like to live through the Great Depression, expecting something as monumental as the history books account. Her response let me down. We were so used to being poor that nothing really changed, except we felt kind of jealous that the other kids got government food. The cheese was good, but our dad had a job, so we didn't get any. Mom never spoke of the heat, but the winters must have chilled the bone. Placing heated stones beneath the covers before heading up to bed, never decorating the tree till Christmas Eve, chicken soup after midnight mass, and orange in your stocking, and the tree not taken down till March, and no heat reached the parlor. I wonder where everyone slept, or for that matter, stood, sat, ate. In time, the sons grew strong and handsome, and the girls so lovely and soft. Save young Virginia, who succumbed at 8, always remembered as if she were just late for yesterday or something important. Knowingly, she glows from the Polaroid. The Kelly brothers wielded baseball bats and leather mitts and spoke of Harry's hands and that passing freight that took his home run all the way to Chicago. Facing the Dutchman always pulsed their veins, and game day brought the Dale as much excitement as it could handle. Later, the boys spoke with awe and honor of their worthy opponents and seemed to wish for just one more swing. Then came autumn, football on the radio. Notre Dame filled the air. Luckily, Verge, a most devoted fan as well, had dashed to church to say a quick prayer when Purdue threatened and Harry punched a hole right through the newly painted living room wall. Always wily, his brother Tom grabbed Father Sheridan's picture, covered it up. Verge never knew. The region, replete with hills. By the way, it's a picture of their row. Red Row is a row of company home. It was called Red Row. Lots of hills truly necessitated a 2-mile trek to and from school every day. Mom described how Byrne, the eldest boy with the biggest feet, walked first, his large footprints marking a path through the snow for the rest to follow up the hill. To no one's surprise, his siblings' voices whispered awe as they sang the song of Byrne. And he became an anchor, like Mom, and they held us all together, as did the others. Red Row tells stories. Now, the tales include us. Years ago, a road came through, houses were raised, but from the porch on that sunny day, Virgie's great gaze still glistens, her heart that warms my beating heart. Fare thee well, our dearest one. 'Tis sure we'll meet again. Here's a picture of Virgie. It's like we have my family has very few photographs, and we asked about things like, well, didn't you have cameras? She said, well, even if you had a camera, nobody had money to get a picture printed. So no, this is like the picture of her. So I'm happy to put her into my book, and it makes me pleased. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. So the stories take us from here all kinds of places. I think Ed Libeck is going to take us farther than anyone else has so far. So Ed, you're up.
Hello. My name's Ed Libeck. I live in Danville. I volunteered with Oren on occasion. I want to relate something before I shuffle off this mortal coil. And it's experiences that I've had, and I don't have much family to tell or relate these things to them. But it had to do with my life in Lewisburg, or before I moved to other places. I started traveling a lot, I just felt that I needed to find adventure someplace. My life was so boring, so dead, so hopeless, I thought. I was a young man. I was about 23 years old. I lost my hair at a young age. I had a lot of problems socializing, and after that, it was kind of hard to get a date. It was kind of hard to do anything, and I find myself in lowly sort of positions and warehouses and pizza delivery. And I kind of I felt there was more to life than this. And so I saved up my tips, my nickels and dimes, and my quarters and dollars. And I said, well, I want to do something with my life other than be a pizza delivery guy. And it was kind of expected of me because my parents were pretty successful and accomplished, educated. I had a terrible case of dyslexia. So I struggled through school. But eventually I did get into Elizabethtown College and then went further. But the thing was this: how was I going to break out of this cycle, I thought? How was I going to get out of pizza delivery? What could I do? Here I was, a bald guy, 23 years old. Who would hire me? What could I do? So I saved, as I said, I saved up my dollars, my pennies, my change. Finally got enough. It was like $2,000 to go to Harrisburg to a place called Joseph's and get a very nicely made hairpiece, a toupee, as they say. And the thing was that it was expensive. It was a human hairpiece. And my brother had one too, by the way. But I think mine was better. So I used this. I used this as a way to get out, I thought. If I was more normal, I would be accepted better. And I'd be able to maybe achieve the things that I thought I could achieve, that normal people did. Okay, so I said, that's great. Well, let's do something constructive. Okay, let's go to college. All right, so I had an associate's degree, so I decided to go apply at Elizabethtown College, which is a Brethren college up in Elizabethtown. And I was there for a couple of years, and not a great student, C average kind of thing. But they came to me and asked me, because I was a non-traditional, I was also an older student at that time. And I was a little bit hairless. And so that kind of stuck out a little bit. And I don't know, maybe they felt sorry for me or something, I don't know. But they came to me and some of the professors said, Ed, we have a program called Brethren Colleges Abroad. I said, oh, what's that about? Well, you could go abroad and you learn whatever subjects or languages or cultures that you'd be interested in. And I said, well, where's the country? And they said, China. And I thought about China. Wow, that's a little bit farther away than Lewisburg or Elizabeth. I'd never been to anywhere outside of the country before. I said, wow, exotic, tempting, adventure, maybe. And then I said, yes, I'll go. So I spent the rest of my loan money, financial aid, and we ended up in a place called Dalian, China, which is in the southern part of Liaoning province. A place that was famous basically as the last refuge or residence of the Emperor Puyi, who was the last emperor of China. And I don't know what happened to him, actually. I really don't know. But I think it went along the ways of the Roman officer. I'm not sure. But anyway, so, okay, this was great. I was in China. I was learning Chinese. I was in a whole new culture. And I felt free. I was interested in the culture and learning about new places and new things. I was very excited about the whole thing. I had my new hairpiece. And my new hairpiece, every now and then, it demanded some maintenance. You take it off, you sort of wash it, hang it out to dry. Little furry thing hanging on the wall. Well, anyway, so eventually what happened was that when we moved to the Dalian Foreign Language Institute, there was an older dorm, which was pretty rickety, But when we had to stay there while they were building the newer dorm, which is a big, beautiful building. And so during that time, I met various people, different people from different countries, Russians, Japanese, Cubans, French, and some I really don't know who they were. But anyway, it was a very interesting time, you know. And we was getting into the swing of things, but the problem was that I was with a group that was split up between people from Pennsylvania and people from California. And I don't know how they got together, to tell you the truth, because it wasn't really a brethren thing. But anyway, they were younger, and they were kind of goofing on me quite a bit, you know, because I was different, and what was I doing there? I was kind of a strange sort of guy with a hairpiece, trying to learn Chinese. They thought I was a spy. A lot of them did. And it was ridiculous. I'm just there I was doing, absorb the culture and learn about what makes the daily lives of the Chinese people, how they lived and how they, you know, what was going on. I wanted to know these things because I was fascinated by it. Well, after a while, the Chinese noticed everything about us. You're not anonymous there. You are watched. You are, you know, they make notes. They follow you. And this was in 1989 in Dalian. As you know, there was things starting to move towards the pro-democracy movement, which was in Beijing mostly. But it was radiating and resonating throughout the whole country, at least where we were. There was a lot of students. And I just admired these students so much. They were up at dawn. They were memorizing the Sidian. The Sidian is a Chinese dictionary. It's an American, it's a dictionary. It's an American English dictionary. And they'd be wandering around in the morning light, dozens of them, just sort of meditating on the words and on what we were. And I said, wow, these people must really idolize us to be doing this with such dedication, such intensity. So I was very, very aware of that. And I did not want to disrespect them in any way. I didn't want them to feel that, you know, we were snobs or acting ugly. Well, that's what I thought. The others were not so cordial. They like to drink, party, act ridiculous. Anyway, I would, and they kept away from me. I kept away from them. I didn't keep away from the Russians. Boy, they like to drink. Oh my God. There's something called baijiu. If anybody offers you a baijiu, do not drink it. Baijiu is like absinthe, what's that called? Absinthe and white lightning all together. And they call it a wine, but it's not a wine. Anyway, I was sick for 4 days. So after that, I behaved myself. And but the Russians were they were from the, you know, there's people there from all over the place. Why were they there? I think they were trying to, you know, get a little bit of education and for the KGB jobs they had. And the others, there was kind of dark stuff going on. But anyway, I just went off on my own. I wanted to learn more about the culture. I was there to learn the culture and to learn the language. And I learned quite a bit. Before I went, I studied, there was a State Department sort of a tutorage, little tapes, cassette tapes that you could learn and listen to. And I used those quite a bit. I forget what 30 language 90s or something. I forget what they call them. Anyway, so moving on. There was things were starting bubbling up politically, and most of the people were very friendly and you know, so they would easily smile at you. There wasn't anything that was really heavy or tense in the air, these places, and we traveled around quite a bit. Went on the Great Wall, and we hiked to the Great Wall where we met the sea, all that sort of stuff. Stayed in temples overnight. It was kind of cool. And to tell you the truth, it was one of the best times of my life. So, moving on, we moved into the new dormitory. The Japanese were there. I didn't see the Russians. I don't know where they went. But the Japanese were there, and there was other people from France and from England. Some Germans were there. They spilled wine on me. I remember. I don't know, I was sort of drunk too. But anyway, things were getting hot, intense. And the mood of the people became very tense and pensive. And I kind of wondered about what was going on. I would go down on the weekends to stay away from the other crowd, go down to a place called the English Corner. The English Corner was a place where the people would go, the Chinese would go to listen to conversational English being spoken and learn the intonations and the, and the method, the emphasis on the vowels and things, consonants, and just to learn how we speak and about America. Now, I didn't profundicate, and I did not proselytize. I didn't do any of that. That wasn't my place. But I would just talk about anything, And there would be 5 people there. Oh, that's cool. That's interesting. So I'd talk, and I'd keep talking. And we'd talk a little bit. And they'd ask questions with those who could speak English. And I'd be like, maybe later, in a few minutes, 10 people. A few minutes, 20 people. And then the police would come. And they would break them up. But it was kind of an interesting phenomenon. And every weekend I would do that. I did it from almost every weekend. And there was this little guy. He wasn't very tall at all. And he had his worker's uniform. He had 2 uniforms. One was drab olive color, greenish, and the other one was black, or blue color, worker's uniform. And so this guy came and we talked a little bit. He would listen intently to me. And just, I would be rambling on about pizza and other things. But, and he was very interested in politics, and we didn't talk about politics too much. I didn't. And so, anyway, he kept coming. Then a few weeks, about a month after that, this very, very tall attaché dressed guy comes up to me. He was in a uniform. He was the tallest, not even for American, also for Chinese. He was like huge. And he comes up to me and says, "Ed," he knew my name. I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you want to have dinner with the general?" I said, "Who?" And he said, "Yes, he's been coming to the English Corner and listening to you." I said, "He was?" Oh, God, I saw bars. I saw something else. I just looked like that guy there. Anyway, so I was a little bit afraid, actually, to tell you the truth. So I said, "Well, I appreciate it, and I want to respectfully decline because I'm with this other group, and I don't want them to worry that I'm not around, and I don't know how to explain that I have dinner with a Chinese general." So I respectfully declined it, and he said, "Okay, thank you, and no problem." And I was a little worried about that. One of the strangest things I saw in China was a Maryland State Trooper's car driving. I swear to God, I don't know how or why. Anyway, so I digress. Weird things, a lot of strange things. I ran into people who thought I was a spy, and they wanted help from the U.S. And it was a group called the Falun Gong, and they met at a Mongolian hot pot place, a restaurant. You couldn't hardly breathe in that place because of the hot pot. There's oil, and you put rat or dog in there or something. And I didn't want to get involved. Why? I thought they were inviting me to dinner. No, it wasn't the reason. But anyway, so okay, thank you, bye. And then I'd go up to the top of the Holiday Inn, which is a British concern, a huge building, and at the top they had a cocktail room, place, bar, and sometimes we'd go up and have pijo, which is beer, and I'd drink a beer and chow down on the free peanuts, and there was a couple of people there a couple of guys. They weren't Americans, but they were Westerners, white-faced people. And he said, come on over, we'll buy a beer. Oh, great. So sit down and had a beer, and they said, have you ever seen one of these? And he handed me a pen. Yeah, I've seen a pen. Gave me the pen. The pen was so heavy and so dense. And I realized it's depleted uranium.
Oh.
Why? What? Oh, arms dealers. Oh. So, thanks. Goodbye. So anyway, I went, I left it. Things like that would happen. And then, okay, so things were heating up in Beijing. Tiananmen Square, they had tanks running over the students and killing people. There was rumors of shots being fired at embassies, which I don't believe is true. But the media, I think, took off with that. And the mommies and the poppies of the kids that I was with got nervous, and we had to basically leave. I wanted to stay. I loved it there. I really did. There was so many things I was learning, and the people were so friendly and welcoming and interested in who you were in the United States, you know. It was very interesting. For me, I felt validated in some ways. Okay. And not an interloper with a hairpiece. I felt validated. So anyway, we're at the airport, and these jokers, some of these kids and people decide before we go to the airport, they bought a roll of Chinese firecrackers that they sell for weddings, big roll like that. And in the middle of the night, somebody decided to set them off during this very tense time. And I thought that was horrendously irresponsible and stupid, selfish, and all the rest. And by the way, we could have gotten all thrown in jail. And that's what the general was thinking about. Because when I met him at the airport, he asked to see me. The attaché guy came over. Ed, the general wants to talk to you. Oh, shit. So, okay, so we went to go. I said, yes, hi, how are you? He said, okay, how are you doing, Ed? We know how they treat you. I said, yeah, well, such is life, you know, c'est la vie. And he said, yes. But we were very upset about this incident with the firecrackers. They gave us a lecture, by the way. There's officials that came to the school. And the behavior of these kids were just incredibly irresponsible. Anyway, but they knew that I was not with that group. I played baseball with the Cubans. They liked me for that. You know, stuff like that. I wrote, I recorded tapes of proper diction and speech vocabulary, how to pronounce vocabulary words and phrases for a bank that was there. They needed a proficiency test, and they needed to hear the words pronounced. So I did that. So they knew about that. They knew about everything. And so they never offered me Baijiu anymore. They did invite us several times for what they call jiaozi. Jiaozi is what we call pot stickers or dumplings. They're very good. They knew I liked dumplings. So anyway, so there was a lot of dinners with that. Moving on to the airport. I had my suitcase, which is about a pretty big suitcase. But these other guys, some of them had huge suitcases filled with duty-free junk. XO this and something that, and the thing was all duty-free. Well, he asked me, took me aside and said, Ed, what do you think we should do about this situation? I said, oh man, I tell you, you mean about what happened with the fireworks and all? And he says, yes, that was very bad and upset a lot of people. And trying to avoid an international incident there, I said, well, you know, I think you're better off without them. You know, it's just a get rid of them. And get rid of, and so I said, okay. So, because they were thinking about keeping them. There was a dormitory, which was a Chinese dormitory, which was not as nice. And there was rooms there that they were talking about putting everybody in. So, on the hair of our chinny chin chin, we were able to get out. Went on to Dragonair. The customs people just threw all this stuff everywhere. I just walked right on. So, sat down, flew to Hong Kong, got out of the airport, almost got killed by a green Rolls Royce. Because they drive on the right, on the left side. So I looked to the left to step off a curb. There's a green Rolls Royce there from the Peninsula Hotel. So I almost got killed in Hong Kong. What a way to go. You get killed by a green Rolls Royce in Hong Kong. What a way to go. So anyway, that's the story, and I thought I'd just relate that. I don't know how you could, you see any real valuable meaning to the story, but other than the fact that I think that if you respect people's cultures and origins, I think there's a lot to be said for that. That's what.
Does anyone else want to come up and tell a story? We can see that the power of stories. We can paint, we can draw. I like to say sometimes a picture needs 1,000 words. The background, the stories behind the pictures tell us a lot. Years ago, I was listening to the radio. It was on National Public Radio one afternoon on All Things Considered. And the story was about one of the Minnesota regiments at Gettysburg. It was an historian from Minnesota who was taking us on a walk around the battlefield, describing what these boys were experiencing in 1863. It was such a better experience just listening to those words and imagining it than it ever would have been on television if he'd been walking around actually showing it. Hearing the words and imagining it was very powerful. So the words of these stories are powerful things. Some of you may have listened in the old days to Charles Osgood, who's a commentator on the radio. And at the end of all of his radio spots, he would say, "I'll see you on the radio." We will see all of you back here at the Exchange. Thank you very much.
Just helping me to stand fast. Faces of light around me, just helping the terror to pass. Helping the terror to pass. Helping the terror to pass.